Let's begin with a structural overview. Welcome to another lecture. Today we examine Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the Saudi statesman whose rule from 1964 to 1975 fused administrative modernization with a deliberately Islamic political vocabulary, and whose oil diplomacy recalibrated the global economy. It is important to understand that we are not merely recounting biography. We are mapping how institutions, ideas, and energy flows intersected. I am Alexei. We will proceed carefully, with context, avoiding melodrama. The archival record already has enough of that. Our aim is to connect policy choices to long-run structures in the kingdom and beyond.
Hello, I'm Priyanka. I will be asking the questions that many of us probably have, and maybe a few we didn't know we had.
To frame our discussion, Faisal bin Abdulaziz was in simplest terms a 20th century monarch who acted like a chief executive confronted with an under-institutionalized enterprise and a volatile external market. He became king in 1964, but his influence predates that by decades. Foreign minister from 1930 almost continuously until his death. Prime Minister for most of 1954 to 1975. If we use a corporate analogy, he inherited a firm with one dominant revenue line, oil, a diffuse management culture, and powerful stakeholders in the religious establishment, the extended royal family, regional notables, and foreign partners. His project was consolidation and modernization without severing the firm's brand identity, which was explicitly Islamic. Terms we should define: Pan-Islamism, a strategy to coordinate Muslim-majority societies politically and morally across borders. In practice, Faisal operationalized this through the Muslim World League in 1962 and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in 1969. Oil diplomacy, the use of production, pricing, and embargo instruments to achieve political ends, most famously in 1973. Ulema, the body of scholars of Islamic law, whose authority in Saudi governance he both relied on and to some extent circumscribed. A fatwa, a juristic opinion. Crucially, a fatwa by the Grand Mufti helped legitimize the 1964 abdication of King Saud. Finally, Aramco, the Arabian-American Oil Company, the kingdom's main oil operator at the time, with whom Faisal renegotiated terms to increase public control. And the Council of Deputies, or Majlis al-Wukala, where in 1931 Faisal presided, signaling his early executive role. With these definitions established, we can proceed to the concrete moves he made.
Professor, may I ask something simple first? If Faisal is the CEO in our analogy, what was his first, restructuring move that really changed the organization?
Arguably, the 10-point program of 1962 is the cleanest answer. It set out governance reforms, judicial professionalization, a provincial administrative system, social welfare commitments like free education and healthcare, and even final abolition of slavery, which that same year freed roughly 1,682 people with state compensation. It reads like a concise prospectus: institutional redesign, human capital investment, and revenue reallocation, all couched in an Islamic register. Moving forward, why does this matter today? Because the 1973 oil embargo revealed that a hydrocarbon supernode could in weeks alter the macroeconomic trajectory of multiple continents. And because Faisal's balancing act between clerical legitimacy and state centralization remains the template for Saudi governance. Many misunderstandings persist. For instance, the notion that modernization required secularization. Faisal demonstrated a third way, limiting direct clerical control over administration, while publicly affirming the Quran as the constitution in 1967.
So, basic facts. Could we sketch the early arc quickly before we slow down for details?
Let's start with the history. Faisal was born in Riyadh in April 1906, maternal grandson of Abdullah bin Abdulatif al-Sheikh, a principal religious scholar who taught him Quran and Islamic law to an advanced level by about age 9. In 1919, as a teenager, he became the first Saudi royal to visit England and France, an atypical diplomatic apprenticeship that shaped his later craft. In 1926, he was appointed Viceroy of Hijaz, integrating the holy cities with sensitivity to their urban traditions. In 1932, he read the decree in Mecca, proclaiming the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and in 1934, he commanded the campaign in the Saudi-Yemeni War. Across the 1930s and 1940s, he visited Turkey, Iran, Poland, the Soviet Union, and the United States, embedding himself as the kingdom's principal diplomat. On domestic reform highlights. As Crown Prince and Prime Minister, he announced the 10-point program in 1962, established television in 1965 despite protests, created the Ministry of Justice in 1970, introduced administrative regions, expanded education with free textbooks and support for low-income students, and insisted that princes educate their children inside the kingdom to signal elite confidence in national institutions. Girls' education gained momentum through the General Presidency for Girls' Education, building upon earlier sponsorships such as Dar al-Hanan in 1956 under his wife Ifat's patronage. Health systems scaled up markedly, culminating in the King Faisal Specialist Hospital opening in 1975. On foreign policy, he fused pan-Islamism and hard power economics, founding the Muslim World League in 1962, convening the Rabat Summit that created the OIC in 1969, refusing ties with the Soviet bloc on the ground that communism was incompatible with Islam, and elevating the Palestinian cause at the UN and in Arab fora. The 1973 oil embargo is the apex of this repertoire. Relations with the United States remained close. He met U.S. presidents in 1966 and 1971 and hosted the first presidential visit in 1974. He also undertook defense modernization, from English Electric Lightnings delivered in 1968 to the King Faisal Air Academy opening in 1970, and even donated newly delivered Mirage 5 aircraft to Egypt in 1974 to buttress post-war Arab capacity. In 1973, he formalized the Saudi flag's use, a symbolic codification amid institutional consolidation. His reign ended abruptly with his assassination in March 1975. The commonly cited motive links back to the 1965 attack on the TV station by the assassin's brother, but motivations remain debated in the historical record.
That is a lot of structure in a short time. It makes me wonder what pulled you into this topic personally.
In simpler terms, the 1973 episode is a perfect case study in strategic commitment. It resembles, if you will, a chess sacrifice. Give up short-term production for long-term bargaining leverage. Also, the administrative engineering fascinates me. We observe how a state learns to plan, to budget, to train professionals, almost in real time.
Professor, may I ask the first big question? Historically, why is Faisal's rise and rule so significant for Saudi Arabia's trajectory?
It is crucial to understand the baseline he inherited. Fiscal imbalance and fragmented authority in the late 1950s had eroded confidence. Between 1962 and the early 1970s, Faisal centralized decision-making through the Council of Ministers, introduced administrative regions to clarify lines of authority, professionalized the judiciary via the Ministry of Justice and a higher judicial council architecture anticipated by the 10-point program, and began coordinated development planning that evolved into 5-year plans from 1969. He redirected oil revenues by revisiting Aramco profit sharing and cultivating state entities like Petromin, which ceded later national control in downstream industries. Infrastructure expanded in roads, ports at Jeddah, Yanbu, and Jazan, aviation with jet acquisitions and a civil aviation institute in Jeddah, and power and water projects that underwrote urban growth. On human capital. Education scaled with free textbooks and stipends. Foreign scholarships trained engineers, administrators, and doctors. Universities such as Imam Mohammed bin Saud Islamic University in Riyadh, and the incorporation of King Abdulaziz University into the public system widened access. The College of Petroleum and Minerals became King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in 1975, aligning skills with the hydrocarbon economy. Healthcare spending rose to about 3.4% of the budget by 1973, with rapid increases in doctors, beds, and clinics. And the King Faisal Specialist Hospital signaled tertiary care ambitions.
Professor, could you clarify the religious dimension? How did he reduce clerical power without provoking an uncontrollable backlash?
The mechanism was twofold. First, legitimacy by lineage and piety. His mother's al-Sheikh ancestry and his own religious education allowed him to argue that television and girls' schooling served Islam's welfare aims. Second, institutional rebalancing. Clerics' direct administrative roles were narrowed. The judiciary was professionalized, and consultative religious bodies were kept under disciplined leadership. He relied on pivotal clerical support when essential, most notably the 1964 abdication fatwa, yet resisted zealot capture of top posts, even removing Sheikh Ibn Baz from a rectorship when criticism overstepped political red lines. Publicly, he anchored governance in the Quran, stating in 1967 that the scripture is the Constitution. Privately, he built the modern ministries to execute policy.
So, moving on. The counterfactual. What if Faisal had not led the 1973 oil embargo? How different might the energy landscape and Middle Eastern politics have been?
We can infer several effects with caution. Without the embargo, the immediate quadrupling of prices likely would have been muted, perhaps replaced by a more gradual price adjustment driven by war risk and producer coordination. Western inflationary pressures would have been less acute, slowing the subsequent rush into energy efficiency, strategic reserves, and North Sea and Alaskan production. Petrodollar recycling would have expanded more slowly, moderating the velocity of Saudi-funded development at home and capital flows abroad. Diplomatically, Arab leverage over the United States and Western Europe would have been reduced. The urgency around the Arab-Israeli conflict might have lacked the economic compulsion that 1973 injected into Western policy calculus. Japan's rapid policy realignment toward Arab states, a hallmark of the period, would likely have proceeded more cautiously. Inside the kingdom, the revenue windfall that underwrote accelerated industrial projects, mega infrastructure, and social spending would have been smaller in the near term. The 5-year planning cycle initiated in 1969 still proceeds, but with tighter budget constraints and possibly slower scale-up of health and education targets. Internationally, Saudi Arabia's brand as energy swing producer with geopolitical bite would have been less vivid. Pan-Islamism through the OIC and Muslim World League still advances, but absent the demonstration effect of oil leverage.
And alternative strategies? If he had chosen not to embargo, what tools did he still have?
Several. Targeted production diplomacy, incremental output cuts linked to explicit political benchmarks, coordinated price guidance within producer groups, and financial statecraft, for example, conditioning placements or development assistance on diplomatic progress. He could continue coalition building through the OIC, expanding humanitarian and religious networks to shift public opinion, leverage custodianship of the holy sites in convening authority, and augment military aid to frontline Arab states, as he did symbolically by donating Mirage 5 aircraft to Egypt in 1974. In short, a portfolio of soft and hard power, without the dramatic market shock of an embargo.
To shift gears a bit. For the present day, what parts of Faisal's legacy are most enduring, and where do scholars still disagree?
Enduring elements are institutional, administrative regions, a professional judiciary under a Ministry of Justice, planning mechanisms, a broadened higher education system, a more capable Air Force and military training ecosystem, and robust health infrastructure. In foreign policy, pan-Islamic frameworks in the Muslim World League and the OIC persist. The strategic partnership with the United States remains foundational, and energy statecraft as an instrument of policy is now embedded in global expectations of Saudi behavior. His rebalancing of clerical influence set the template for governing change while maintaining religious legitimacy, a pattern that has been iterated since. On open debates. First, abolition of slavery in 1962. U.S. pressure, including a secret 1962 meeting with President Kennedy, likely mattered. But the causal weight versus internal dynamics is contested in the literature. Second, the 1969 arrests over an alleged Nasserist coup plot. Some accounts suggest an American intelligence tip. The evidentiary basis remains opaque. Third, discrimination and inclusion. Some scholars, such as Mai Yamani, argue that after Faisal's era, sectarian and regional discrimination became systemic. Others credit him with meaningful pluralist gestures, including bringing Hijazi technocrats into government and consulting Sufi scholars on Meccan affairs. Fourth, the assassination's motive. The link to television-related outrage is widely cited, but not conclusively proven. Finally, there is an unresolved question about unintended consequences of managing religious authority. For instance, the later radicalization of some students from institutions where tensions surfaced in his time suggests a complex feedback loop that merits further archival work.
Maybe it is just me, but the image of a leader formalizing a national flag in 1973 while also redesigning budgets and ports is, surprisingly vivid. It makes the state feel like a living system with symbols and spreadsheets together.
Indeed, a living system with, as it were, a spreadsheet the size of the empty quarter. Symbols stabilize identity while plans mobilize resources. Faisal tended both. To summarize, Faisal bin Abdulaziz was a monarch who acted with the discipline of a reforming executive, centralizing administration, expanding education and health, professionalizing justice, and leveraging oil to global effect, all while articulating his legitimacy in Islamic terms. We asked 3 questions: why his historical significance lies in institutional design and calibrated religious politics, how a no-embargo counterfactual would have softened energy shocks and reduced Arab leverage, and which legacies endure amid scholarly debates on causality and inclusion. For further study, we recommend following the long arc of Saudi energy strategy and the evolution of pan-Islamic institutions from 1969 onward. This then completes our present analysis. Thank you for listening, and as always, interrogate the sources as carefully as you would a balance sheet.
Thank you, Professor. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. We hope this was clarifying and maybe a little surprising.